Hello, friend. Thanks for coming back again for another episode of the Driver's Seat Preacher and 10 Virgins Parable.blogspot.com. Today, we're going to be discussing the books of Leviticus and Deuteronomy so that they can give us context for when we dig into Levirate marriage, understanding in the book of Ruth. I'm going to assume that you've already watched Begot, Segunes, The Prophet Like Unto Moses, and part 1 of Luke's genealogy, Eusebius and the story of Ruth and Boaz. Are you ready? Let's get started. Hello, friend. There's two types of marriage I'd like to introduce you to. The first is called Levirate marriage. It has nothing to do with the tribe of Levi. Levirate is Latin for brother-in-law. The second type is called Sorite marriage. This has to do with a sister-in-law. We're going to learn more about these when we dig into Leviticus and Deuteronomy. In part 1 of this video teaching, we learned what Eusebius of Caesarea had to say about the genealogies in Matthew and in Luke, and he explains to us that in Israel, they rendered genealogies either by law or by nature. Hopefully at the end of that video, you were able to discern the difference between Matthew and Luke's gospel, that Matthew is Joseph's natural line and that Luke is his legal line. As we dig deeper into Levirate marriage and the law of redemption, we're going to discover that it necessitates, Levirate marriage necessitates the two genealogies. Okay, friend, what I'd like for you to do is turn in your own Bible to the book of Leviticus. Let's begin in chapter 23, verse 22, as we learn about a law which will come into play when we read Ruth. Leviticus chapter 23, verse 22. When you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not wholly reap the corners of your field when you reap, nor shall you gather any gleaning from your harvest. You shall leave them for the poor and for the stranger. I am Yahuwah, your Elohim. When we finally dig into the book of Ruth together, you're going to find in Ruth chapter 2 that Ruth asks Naomi for permission to go and glean among the sheaves of the harvest. We're also going to find that Boaz himself shows her mercy and favor. He's keeping Torah because she is both poor and a stranger in the land. She is a foreigner. Okay, next we're going to turn to Leviticus chapter 25, picking up in verse 23 through verse 26. The land shall not be sold permanently, for the land mine. For you, strangers and sojourners with me, and in all the land of your possession, you shall grant redemption of the land. When we dig into the book of Ruth, what we discover is that Naomi has sold the piece of land that formerly belonged to her husband, Elimelech. Likewise, Ruth has herself sold the piece of land that was owned by her husband, Chilion, who was the son of Elimelech. Boaz and another unnamed gentleman are brothers of Elimelech's. And Boaz asks the unnamed gentleman who is closer, he asks him to redeem the land that Naomi had sold. Redemption of the land. Picking up in verse 25, if one of your brethren becomes poor and has sold of his possession, and if his redeeming relative comes to redeem it, then he may redeem what his brother sold. Skipping ahead to verse 35, if one of your brethren becomes poor and falls into poverty among you, then you shall help him like a stranger or a sojourner, that he may live with you. Friend, Yahuwah cares about the poor. He cares about the widow. He cares about inheritance rights and the needs of those who have fallen into poverty. Can you see it yourself in the words of the written Torah? Follow me as we pick up in verse 36. Take no usury or interest from him, but fear your Elohim, that your brother may live with you. You shall not lend him your money for usury, nor lend him your food at a profit. When we examine the book of Ruth, we discover that both Naomi and Ruth have sold their possession. They have sold the home, the inheritance of their husbands, and have themselves fallen into poverty, which is why we see Ruth gleaning among the sheaves. That was something reserved for those who had become poverty-stricken. It is a form of mercy. It is not a handout, but it is a hand up, because they must still work and gather for themselves, but it offers them dignity in addition to the mercy. Okay, next we're going to turn in our Bibles to the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 25, beginning in verse 5. Follow along with me as we read in your own Bible. If brothers dwell together and one of them dies and has no son, the widow of the dead man shall not be married to a stranger outside the family. Her husband's brother shall go into her, take her as his wife, and perform the duty of a husband's brother to her. Okay, here we have the same passage, but I am drawing your attention to the phrase husband's brother, which appears twice in this particular passage, and it is within context of the term duty. We will look at these terms in the Hebrew in just a moment. Here we have the Western Leningrad Codex, and I'm drawing your attention to the word Yabam. Yabam. It appears twice in this text, but this particular word here is a noun. Yabam. The outline of biblical usage also informs us that this term means brother-in-law, husband's brother. Strong's tells us this term comes from H 2992. Yabam, a verb implying an action. The action which is implied is to perform Levirate marriage, to perform the duty of a brother-in-law to a brother who died childless, to marry his widow and have a son for his name. Here we have the second appearance of this same term at the end of Deuteronomy 25:5, preceded by a vav, ve'abam, ve'abam. Notice how the Hebrew parsing tells us this particular word is a verb. It's a verb implying action with the same root H 2992. Picking back up again in Deuteronomy 25 verse 6, follow along. And it shall be that the firstborn son which she bears will succeed to the name of his dead brother, that his name may not be blotted out of Israel. But if the man does not want to take his brother's wife, then let his brother's wife go up to the gate to the elders and say, my husband's brother refuses to raise up a name to his brother in Israel. He will not perform the duty of my husband's brother. Then the elders of his city shall call him and speak to him. But if he stands firm and says, I do not want to take her, then his brother's wife shall come to him in the presence of the elders, remove his sandal from his foot, spit in his face, and answer and say, so shall it be done to the man who will not build up his brother's house. And his name shall be called in Israel the house of him who had his sandal removed. Okay, now we're going to be looking deeper into the law of redemption. What can actually be redeemed? According to the Bible, the things that can be redeemed are people, animals, firstborn sons, your life, possessions, tithes, your soul, and the children of Israel. I encourage you to screenshot this and look these passages up on your own. There are, in fact, 5 English words that I researched for this study. The terms redeem, redeemed, redeemer, redeeming, and redemption. I encourage you to research these on your own using a software program like eSword, which is free, by the way. As I dug deeply into the Hebrew text, what I would discover is that there are actually 9 different Hebrew words which we see rendered into the 5 English terms. Additionally, when I looked at these terms in the Greek New Testament, I was able to locate 6 Greek words. I have at this time not examined the Greek Septuagint, the Greek Old Testament, to see how many Greek terms were used there to translate these Hebrew terms. I would encourage you to do that study on your own. We will be examining how this term redeem appears in Exodus 6:6, Leviticus 25:25, and how they both appear in Ruth chapter 4:4 and Ruth chapter 4 verse 6. Friend, I'm going to ask you to turn with me now in your own Bibles to the book of Exodus chapter 6 verse 6. If you have Bible study software, go ahead and open it now if you haven't already done it. Therefore, say to the children of Israel, I, Yahuwah, will bring you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians. I will rescue you from their bondage and will redeem you with an outstretched arm and with great judgments. Here we have the Western Leningrad Codex of this passage. You'll notice that I have highlighted the term ve-gaelti. Ve-gaelti. Its root is gael. Gael. Here we see that gael is a verb. It is H1350. Again, the parsing shows that it is a verb. According to the outline of biblical usage, it means to redeem, to act as a kinsman redeemer, to avenge, revenge, ransom, do the part of a kinsman. To act as kinsman, do the part of next of kin, act as kinsman redeemer. How exactly? By marrying a brother's widow to beget a child for him, to redeem from slavery, to redeem land, to exact vengeance, to redeem by payment, to redeem with God as subject, to redeem individuals from death, to redeem Israel from Egyptian bondage, to redeem Israel from exile, to redeem one's self, to be redeemed. Here we have the translation count and the many ways Gael can be translated into English. Redeem, redeemer, kinsman, revenger, avenger, ransom, at all, deliver, kinsfolk, kinsman's part, purchase, stain, and wise. According to Strong's definitions, Gael is a primitive root, meaning to redeem, to be the next of kin, and as such, to buy back a relative's property, to marry his brother's widow, to be the avenger, the deliverer, to do or perform the part of near or next kinsfolk or kinsmen, to purchase, ransom, redeemer, revenger. Turn with me now in your own Bibles to the book of Ruth, chapter 4, verse 4, and follow along. For context, you should know that Boaz is speaking to the unnamed close relative of his brother Elimelech. And I thought to inform you, saying, buy back in the presence of the inhabitants and the elders of my people. If you will redeem, redeem. But if you will not redeem, tell me, that I may know. For no one but you to redeem, and I next after you. And he said, I will redeem it. In this passage, the underlying Hebrew term Gael is used all 5 times and is translated as redeem. Remember, Gael can be used as both a verb and a noun. Here we see Boaz asking the unnamed close relative to perform an action, to be the Gael, to be the one to redeem the land on behalf of Naomi and Ruth. Picking back up in verse 5, then Boaz said, on the day you buy the field from the hand of Naomi, you must also buy from Ruth, the Moabitess, the wife of the dead, to perpetuate the name of the dead through his inheritance. Here we see the term redeem appears 3 times and the term of redemption once. And the close relative said, I cannot redeem for myself, lest I ruin my own inheritance. You redeem my right of redemption for yourself, for I cannot redeem it. 3 times in this passage we see the English term redeem, and 3 times the underlying Hebrew term is Gael. Gael. Here we see the phrase right of redemption. However, in the Hebrew, it is simply one word, and that term is Geulah. Geulah, H 1353. Geulah. Notice it is a noun. Its root, which is a verb, is Gael. What does it mean to be the Geulah? It means to be kindred, redemption, right of redemption, price of redemption, kindred, redemption price. Strong's tells us that this term Geulah means redemption, including the right of redemption and the object of redemption. By implication, a relationship, to be kindred, to redeem, redemption, right, specifically of redemption. Picking back up in verse 7, now this, the custom in former times in Israel concerning redeeming and exchanging. To confirm anything, one man took off his sandal and gave to the other, and this a confirmation in Israel. Continuing in verse 8, therefore the close relative said to Boaz, buy for yourself. So he took off his sandal. And Boaz said to the elders and all the people, You witnesses this day that I have bought all that was Elimelech's, and all that was Chilion's and Mahlon's from the hand of Naomi. Moreover, Ruth, the Moabitess, the widow of Mahlon, I have acquired as my wife to perpetuate the name of the dead through his inheritance, that the name of the dead may not be cut off from among his brethren, and from his position at the gate. You witnesses this day. And all the people who at the gate and the elders said, Witnesses, Yahuwah make the woman who is coming to your house like Rachel and Leah, the two who built the house of Israel. And may you prosper in Ephrath and be famous in Bethlehem. So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. And when he went into her, Yahuwah gave her conception, and she bore a son. Then the women said to Naomi, Blessed Yahuwah, who has not left you this day without a close relative, and may his name be famous in Israel. So, in order to be redeemed, the Redeemer had to be a close relative. Who is our close relative? Yeshua. Who is our Gael, our Redeemer? Yeshua. Who is our Geulah? Yeshua. Even Ruth, who was a Moabitess, was able to be joined to Israel. When the Tanakh teaches that no descendant of Moab will enter into Israel up to 10 generations. Why was Ruth eligible? Because when Naomi went to send Orpah and Ruth back to their people, back to Moab, back to their own gods, Ruth declared, wherever you go, I will go. Your Elohim will be my Elohim. Where you live, I will live. Where you die, I will die. Ruth had come to love the Elohim of Israel, and she desired to keep Torah. We're told in the book of Ruth that Boaz knows that she is a virtuous woman. Do you really think Boaz would have married a pagan who was unrighteous, who was ineligible? No. Naomi had converted. She desired Yahuwah, and she desired to be under his blessing and under his wing. Friend, this concludes the end of this particular teaching. In part 3, we're going to dig deeper into the book of Ruth, and we're going to, hopefully, by the end, help you to understand that the reason for the two genealogies in Matthew and in Luke is because there's Levirate marriage going on within his genealogy. And Boaz and Ruth aren't the only ones where we see Levirate marriage. We also see it in the story of Tamar and Judah. Because Judah was unrighteous and didn't allow her to marry his third son. She tricked him, but she enabled Levirate marriage to occur. She enabled for there to be an offspring from a close relative. If we don't understand Levirate marriage, we will not understand why the two genealogies. Once that's clear to us, then understanding the relationship between Miriam and Elizabeth becomes extremely pivotal. Remember, friend, Paul said to test all things. He didn't say to speak in tongues to show yourself approved, or to tithe to show yourself approved, or to perform miracles to show yourself approved. Remember, there's one coming who will perform lying signs and wonders. He told us to study, and that implies a deeper examination of the text. Study hard, friends. Yeshua is coming, but first, great tribulation. Until next time, watch your six and dig because your life depends on it. Shalom.